Hello, my name is Lizzie and welcome back to my channel. I've been on a very healing journey with MEN1 over the past 5 or 6 years, and today I wanted to share with you the key milestones from the very medical part of my history with MEN1. It's a part of my journey that I don't go back into much nowadays, saying that I'm so far out of that side of things, but it is a part of the story, and I know that so many of you watching are probably managing medical intervention at the moment, whether it's medication for your symptoms or looking at surgery to manage things, chasing doctors or trying to find the best care. And I thought it'd be really helpful for me to go through my journey to show you how it's got me to where I am now, and to hopefully leave you with some inspiration for what things could look like for you if your journey follows anything like mine has. I won't be going deep into the archives by any means, but I do have a few notes here to help me share with you just the key moments. Stay till the very end, because I'll also leave you with a really cool resource which helps you tangibly put in place some really cool biohacking methods which have got me symptom-free and surgery-free and off medication in MEN1. The first point really in MEN1 for me was my diagnosis. I was tested for MEN1 just before my 13th birthday. There was a history of MEN1 in my dad's side of the family. So my dad had it, he was very unwell with it, and his sister sadly passed away and they'd inherited it from their mum. And much further back, we don't know. A positive result from that genetic test sent me to Bristol Children's Hospital. And though that wasn't a centre of expertise, it gave me absolutely amazing care. So at 14, bearing in mind this was only 1 year later than my genetic test, I had hypos and they were absolutely horrible. And an MRI scan, showed one insulinoma that was big enough to be seen on an MRI. I eventually had open pancreatic surgery to deal with that, and they ended up removing multiple tumours. All I can remember is that they were active, so they were producing excess hormone, which had been giving me the hypos. So in their minds, getting rid of those tumours was the best thing that could have been done at that time. My recovery went very well. I'm going to put a lot of that down to positive mindset, fitness, youth maybe. I was actually skiing 10 weeks later after my surgery. I think at that time MEN1 felt like it was something to manage, but it wasn't the focus of my life, and I didn't want it to be either. There definitely was a certain amount of denial that I probably wouldn't come and face until a lot later in my journey. The second major milestone for me in MEN1 was around the age of 17, when a routine scan very suddenly revealed another pancreas tumour. And again, this was large enough to remove, but I had no symptoms from it. So this was after a few years of MEN1 lying quite low, which I know happens with a lot of us in MEN1, that things tend to flare up and then they go quite quiet for a bit, and then they flare up and they go quiet. This was a flare up I just wasn't expecting, and life seemed to be pretty swell for me. The surgery was then planned for that December. It would have been around the time that I was taking my application to get into Oxbridge, so it was quite stressful, but the hospital were amazing. They were able to book my surgery in and around all my exams, all my tests, and my interview. Very sadly, 2 months prior to that, my dad passed away super suddenly, and I think my response was just to stick my head down, despite the surgery, despite everything I was going through, and just get through. It was my way of coping with it at the time. So I went ahead with the operation. Again, recovered very, very well. I can't remember if there was a skiing trip 10 weeks later after that one, but obviously it was emotionally hard. I remember it being a more difficult surgery, despite the fact it was 4 years later. Medical technology had obviously advanced massively. I actually had a side room, so I wasn't on a ward, but I just remember that being a more difficult experience than the previous time. So that was quite an intense winter, because I'd had my interviews for Oxford, in and out of grief over my dad. I've had the surgery and then final A-levels for school, like all in one season. I actually got into Oxford in the end, and I specifically remember opening the letter and I still had my surgical drain in situ, and I was so excited, but I couldn't show too much excitement. I couldn't laugh too hard because it was so painful. My scar was so painful, I still had the drain in, and I will absolutely never forget that. I think the next stage for me was university and getting into functional medicine. So again, MEN1 lay low after that. Around my first 2 or 3 years of university, I didn't really have any problems. But then my final year was very tough. I thought I was headed in for a 3rd round of pancreatic surgery, and I wasn't. And that was a lesson for me not to read medical jargon and assume I know what it means. But it really shook me. It shook me to my core. Not long after, my calcium shot up, and it was the highest it had ever been. And I was completely fatigued. Like, this was a fatigue like I'd never been able to experience before. And not only that, but I was just miserable at university. I don't think it was depression, but I just wanted to leave. I didn't want to be there anymore. I remember going on some medication for my calcium. That definitely seemed to help. And then when the pandemic hit, I went back home and everything kind of reached a bit of a head. I had the worst mood swings ever. We weren't sure whether to put them down to symptoms or to the medication that were trying to suppress the symptoms. My immediate response was, it's got to be a MEN1. I think that's probably what my family believed as well. And it was just a stressful time, really. I don't think anyone remembers that time with complete fondness, if they're very honest. Certainly me, I didn't. The funny thing is, I'd already started working with a functional medicine doctor the year before, and it was helping me in my general health. Once my exams finished and I sat my finals, bearing in mind I did those at home on a laptop, I then had an inordinate amount of spare time. And I absolutely threw myself behind, like, from curiosity into functional medicine. The changes I'd experienced for my gut were so phenomenal, and in my general health. And I just wondered, what if this might change my MEN1 health as well? I got into epigenetics. I went from the allopathic model, conventional medicine, to slightly more alternative functional medicine. And then all the way over to kind of what I call the very hippie side of healing, yoga and meditation and all the things which are completely intangible. And that really was the beginning of the massive change. That really was the end of what I call now the medical roller coaster in my life, that chapter. Since then, I haven't had surgery. So I haven't had surgery for 10 years. I've had no symptoms since that final flare-up during COVID. And I'm off all my MEN1 medications, and I have been for a year. This video, I'm going to stop here at the point where my healing journey begins, because I think it wraps up really nicely what I see as the first chapter of MEN1, which was all of those medical flare-ups and the amazing ways that we had to deal with it. If you're curious about the next part, so how I moved from operations and medications now to trend bucking all my results, I have a free guide in the description box below, which walks through 3 very tangible things I'm doing every single day as part of my healing protocol that keeps me where I am now. So keeping surgery and medications and symptoms off the table. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. I've certainly had fun diving back into some bits of my medical experience that I haven't really gone over in many years, so it's been healing in that respect. I'm really excited you're here. If you would share this video with someone who you think could benefit from listening to this, whether or not they have MEN1. Definitely hit subscribe if you want to know about my next update. Don't forget to download your free guide, and I will see you next week for my next video.